Hello, my name is Prem, and for my presentation I'll be discussing perceptual confirmation. Perceptual confirmation is the idea that if you expect someone to behave in a certain way, you're more likely to perceive their behavior to be in parallel with those expectations that you have. So in other words, we have a tendency to use our pre-existing ideas and values to interpret someone's behavior to be consistent with those values and those expectations. A couple of studies have looked into this, and the first one is Downey and Feldman in 1996. They examined how childhood experiences of rejection might have lasting effects throughout life. They expected that significant rejection experiences should shape the beliefs and expectations adults bring to their intimate relationships, leading to increased rejection sensitivity than those who weren't rejected as a kid. The way they looked at this was by having participants complete a survey that reports their rejection sensitivity, and then they interacted with a confederate, so someone who is working alongside the investigators but acting as a participant. So the confederate spoke with the participant for a short period of time, and then they left. The examiner came into the room and informed the participant that the confederate no longer had a desire to participate in the study. So when they looked at the results for this investigation, they noticed that people scoring low in rejection sensitivity, so those that weren't rejected as a child, had no reaction. They just assumed that the person who left the room, so the confederate, had something else to attend to. However, people scoring high in rejection sensitivity when they were rejected as a child felt upset. They felt insulted that this person left them, and they were just kind of alone in the study. Another study has to do with Bolivia and Murray in 2003. They looked at how self-esteem can affect perceptions of intimate relationships. They predicted that self-esteem would have some sort of impact on intimate relationships, and so they expected that high self-esteem would result in people expecting them to like themselves more, and people with low self-esteem would expect people to dislike them more. The way they tested it was that students took a survey testing their self-esteem levels, and afterwards were asked to imagine an encounter with their romantic partner. The mood of the participant, or the mood of the partner, was given to them as positive or negative. And then half the participants were given a reason for their mood, while the others weren't. The participants were then told to describe their reactions to their imaginary encounter. Then when they looked at the results, they noticed that when a reason was given for the partner's negative mood, participants with low self-esteem were more likely to attribute themselves for the negative mood. So what this means is that those that are high in self-esteem, when they had a partner with a negative mood, they assumed that there was something else that was bothering their partner. But when someone had low self-esteem, they blamed themselves for the negative mood. A couple examples I've created for perceptual confirmation include this one, Billy and Jane. In the past, when Billy called his partners and was told, "Hey, I'll call you back later," by his partner, his romantic partners proceeded to call back, informing him that they wanted to part ways. This created rejection sensitivity for Billy. When Billy called Jane while she was at work, so Jane's his current partner, Jane said, "Hey, I'll call you back later." Billy began to panic that Jane was going to break up with him. He expected rejection and thus got upset from Jane's ambiguous behavior. However, when Jane called back later and informed Billy that she was genuinely busy and unavailable to chit-chat, Billy felt relieved. So basically, Billy's been broken up with over the phone a lot of times when his partners have said, "Hey, I'll call you back later," and when his current partner Jane did that, he was super worried that she was breaking up with him. And this illustrates perceptual confirmation because he expects to be rejected, and when an ambiguous behavior occurred, he followed the train of thought that he had from the past to lead to the conclusion to perceive that Jane's actions were in parallel with those previous expectations. Another example has to do with James and his professor. James has an 89.4 in his Bio 101 class. He remembers his professor saying at the beginning of the semester that students who work hard or students he believes are deserving of a small grade bump would be given one. In the past, when James had requested the same behavior from professors, he was always denied and left upset. Expecting the same response by his current professor, James was reluctant to ask. He perceived the professor's ambiguous behavior of offering a grade bump to be consistent with his past and wasn't willing to ask. This again, also perceptual confirmation. I've actually highlighted a video to illustrate this as well, and here it is.
You may have heard the term self-fulfilling prophecy before, and in fact someone may have used that term without even knowing about the psychology behind it. But really, when psychologists talk about self-fulfilling prophecy, it's a way in which a schema has a huge impact on outcomes, for a couple of reasons. The key behind self-fulfilling prophecy is that a schema that a person has for another person influences their expectations of that person, which then in turn influence the actual outcomes the person displays. That all sounds very theoretical and abstract. Let's give a concrete example. An early instance of self-fulfilling prophecy is what some people call the Pygmalion effect, but it was a study done in the 60s in which school teachers were given the roster of kids that they were going to have in their upcoming school year, but the manipulation was that at random, some of the kids on their roster were marked gifted, and some of them were not marked gifted. This had nothing to do with the students themselves. It was totally at random who was marked gifted versus not. But the teachers were led to believe that some panel of experts had designated some students as being especially likely to do well than others. Now, the schema that a teacher would have about a gifted student lets them expect various things from the students who are marked gifted. So the schema now that comes to mind is that of accomplishing good things in class, being attentive, doing extra work, working really hard. Those are what's associated with the schema of a gifted student, which leads those teachers to expect that the students marked gifted will do well in their class. Now here's where self-fulfilling prophecy kicks in. Because at the end of the school year, when you look at the actual test scores of the students in this experiment, the kids who had been randomly marked gifted at the beginning of the year got better scores at the end of the year than kids who hadn't been marked gifted. How could this be? It was totally random. Those kids weren't actually more gifted objectively than the other students, so how could this have happened? Well, the answer lies in the fact that the teachers would have ended up treating the gifted students differently than the non-gifted students. Because they expected the group marked gifted to do better, they would give them more opportunities, more chances to succeed, because they expected from their schema that they would end up doing better anyway. So they changed their own behavior toward them based on their expectations.
So although this presentation isn't about self-fulfilling prophecy, this video illustrates perceptual confirmation because the teachers in the example given are told that they have some gifted students. Based on her past experiences with gifted students, the teacher is going to perceive those gifted students in a more advanced academic manner. This heightened perception of the students illustrates perceptual confirmation because an expectation is set on the behavior of those students, and in result, the teacher is more likely to perceive the students as gifted. This can occur regardless of whether the students are truly gifted or not, as explained in the video, because they were all randomly chosen. So that's going to be the end of my presentation on perceptual confirmation. Just to give a one-sentence summary, perceptual confirmation is the idea that people use their previous experiences as a basis for filling in information from ambiguous encounters. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you learned something about perceptual confirmation.